basically, you've got all these red blood cells flowing through your bloodstream. And what the A1C is telling us is what percentage of those red blood cells have sugar attached. So if the percentage is much higher, the sugar has been in the blood for too long. If the percentage is lower, then we're in a nice, good place and our body's processing that sugar in a good way.
Welcome to the Good Clean Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Ginger Hultin, an integrative registered dietitian nutritionist. Before we begin, I want to thank Colleen Webb. She left a really kind review of the show, and that goes a long way with helping other folks find us, and I really appreciate it. It's actually really easy to do. Wherever you happen to be listening to your podcasts, you can go to the review section and leave a star rating. If you want to take it one small step further, I would love to hear your feedback. You can just drop me a quick review. And if you have more information or a good nutrition question or something you want to ask about an episode, go to the Good Clean Nutrition Podcast page. Scroll down just a little and you'll see some instructions and an orange button. There, you can just push the button and record any thoughts you have about nutrition. I listen to them all personally, and I'd really love to hear from you. Today on the show, I'm talking with diabetes nutrition expert Angela Manderfeld. She's a registered dietitian and is board certified in advanced diabetes management. We're delving into the world of diabetes and the health technology available to help monitor and regulate blood sugar, really, including continuous blood glucose monitors, weight loss drugs, and insulin pumps. From my understanding, you have always been into specific data when it comes to diabetes, and I love the story about you in college helping your grandpa make spreadsheets of his data for his doctor.
Yeah. So I would come home from college on the weekend and my grandpa was diagnosed with diabetes and he was on insulin. And every time he went to his doctor, he loved to show his doctor what he'd been doing. He always checked his blood sugar in the morning and always at bedtime, never during the day. And so he liked to enter these into an Excel spreadsheet and we would make graphs and he would print them out and he would take them to his doctor and he was just so thrilled with himself and his doctor would rave about it and he felt so proud.
You are sort of famous for being able to lower A1C, but I just, to get everyone on the same page, wanted to do a quick definition of A1C and why it's important.
What's nice about the A1C is it's not just that snapshot because people always say, oh, well, I went in for my lab test, but the day before I did this. So this gives us 2 to 3 months of an average blood sugar. So basically, you've got all these red blood cells flowing through your bloodstream. And what the A1C is telling us is what percentage of those red blood cells have sugar attached. So if the percentage is much higher, the sugar has been in the blood for too long. If the percentage is lower, then we're in a nice, good place and our body's processing that sugar in a good way. Just a 0.2, 0.1 drop is a big deal, especially when people are working hard at home. Like they're not taking extra medicine to get their blood sugar, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. But like when they're making changes at home and they see their blood sugar went from 6.5 to 6.3, that's a difference of the diagnosis switching from type 2 to prediabetes. That's a big deal. So I think it's important that people understand when they look at that lab test, any little point helps and it counts.
I wanted to dive into the world of continuous glucose monitors. We call those sometimes CGMs for short. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us more about that and how they help people manage their diabetes.
It is such a game changer. Years ago, when my mom figured out she had diabetes, we put a Dexcom on her for 7 days. And that changed her life. Like she was in my house. She saw her sugar go up to 170 and she was here visiting and she started walking. I got this kind of circle path you can do through my house. And at the time, my little 3-year-old is like following her around and they're doing laps in the house. She can see it coming down. She's like, oh my gosh,
wow,
my blood sugar is starting to come down. So she was able to make that connection really quick. And then when she ate something, she was looking at what happened with the numbers. And it was like this light bulb went off. And that was before CGM was a big deal. That was probably 7-8 years ago. And it has, again, been a life changer. And most of my clients say that. Some of them, I will say, will freak out a little bit. They're like, oh, sometimes I just have to take it off because I'm stressing out. So I do say, you know what, take some time off. You know what has the biggest impact on your blood sugar. So take a break. But it really has helped people make that connection between what I eat and how I move. What does that do to my sugar? And it really helps reinforce.
And just for reference, for anyone that's not familiar, 170 is definitely pretty high. What would be normal? And then when do you start to worry on a CGM as far as numbers, just for context?
So fasting and pre-meal, blood sugar should be hanging out in like maybe 70s to 90s for the most part if you do not have diabetes. And then, you can see it pop up after meals. It might pop into the low 100s, 120s. Sometimes I've even seen 130s, 140s. But that would be considered like normal range when someone does not have diabetes. When someone does have diabetes, we have a little bit more of a tolerance, like what we're looking for. And depending on where they are in their journey and how well controlled their sugars are, some people might have a target goal of 2 hours after eating. They don't want to go higher than 140 or 160. And then maybe people who've had a little bit more struggle with their blood sugar, maybe their goal is 180. It's all individualized. And then fasting, like when someone gets up in the morning, if they have diabetes, we usually say, if you can keep it under 110, 120. There's so many different groups out there that have different recommendations. ADA has their recommendation, ACE has their recommendation. But I usually just talk to my patient. We look at where they are, and then we kind of decide what would be the best goal for them at this time.
Working with dietitian experts really helps have that level of personalization because this is not a one size fits all. And the really interesting thing about CGMs is learning how does exercise bring my rates down and how fast? What foods do I react to the most? So can you talk us through a little bit like how it works and why it matters?
So what I teach my clients is a concept called carbohydrate tolerance. So back in the day, as diabetes educators, we used to give people carb budgets. And we would be like, okay, you only get 45 grams of carbs per meal, or you only get 60 grams of carbs per meal. Some people appreciated that. They liked the structure and they would aim to do that. But now we can do it a different way. What we do now is we look at what is your blood sugar before you eat and how high did it go and what did you have to eat. So people will notice things that are a little higher in like inflammatory oils or saturated fats with carbohydrates. They might notice their blood sugar goes higher. If they have a healthy, high fat, healthy meal, like lots of olive oil and high fiber carbohydrates, they might notice that their blood sugar doesn't go quite as high. But everybody's different. Some people will say, I react to rice, but I can eat oatmeal just fine. And other people are like, I can't eat oatmeal, but I do fine with rice. So we're looking at that relative difference from where did we start to where did we end about 2 hours after eating. And we're looking really for no more than 30 to 50. Like if they have type 2 diabetes, we don't really want more than 30 to 50 points. If it goes more than that, maybe you just didn't tolerate. So maybe they need to decrease the carbohydrates, bump up the protein and healthy fats a little bit, change out carbohydrates for higher quality, like higher fiber. So we just look at what is it they're doing and how can we manipulate it.
I love that takes the recommendations off of just paper and theory and what could or should happen into actually what does this mean for you in your life. But I know that you and me and all dietitians are very wary of any language like carbs are bad. And I could see somebody slipping into that. Tell me how you manage those expectations.
Well, I really do explain like why we do need carbohydrates. Carbohydrates help fuel us. So if you do want to go exercise, it's going to be harder if you don't have some carbohydrates on board. The fiber in the carbohydrate foods helps feed our good gut bacteria, which also impacts our blood sugar level. So there's two things I tell them. One, be snobby about the carbohydrates that you're going to eat. So don't just eat anything that comes your way. Make sure it's worthy, like you really want it. Number two, make sure it's high quality, something that's going to serve you in some way. And it could be either or because, like it's your birthday. Birthday cake doesn't have high fiber, but it freaking tastes good. And on those other days, just really be picky about making sure that you got the fiber in your diet that you need. And that's the key, that carbohydrates serve a purpose. And you just want to make sure that it's something that you want. And then also thinking about what does my body need? You have to balance those two things. If we're just eating the high fiber stuff all the time and not thinking about, oh, you know what? I really do like to have pasta now and then, or I really do like to have rice with this dish. Putting a bad name on those foods definitely doesn't make for long-term sustainability when it comes to making positive changes to our health.
I'm just wondering, what a person that doesn't have diabetes should know about this, or if you would recommend the average person use one.
Yeah. So maybe a year ago, I was like, why would people that don't have diabetes put this on? But then I put one on in October and I thought, you know what? I'm going to have some fun with it. I'm going to see how high I can get my blood sugar. So I went and I got a cheeseburger, French fries, and a chocolate milkshake. I ate all those things and then I sat on the couch. I got my blood sugar up to 200. Then I started playing around doing some different things, and I would eat like a high carb meal, and then I would get on the treadmill and I would just see it drop back down. So I was like, okay, I can see how people might like this. And the other piece to this is when I wore one before, it was probably several years ago. I'm 46 now, so I'm perimenopausal. And that absolutely can play a role in your glucose metabolism and how high your blood sugar goes. So to have people that don't have diabetes wear a CGM, it is a bit of an eye opener. And they might even catch some patterns that they're like, whoa, that's crazy. So yeah, I think there is a use for it. And 2 companies have come up with CGMs that are specifically designed for people who don't have diabetes, and you don't need a prescription for them.
It's becoming so much more accessible. You specifically are a certified continuous glucose monitor and insulin pump trainer. So what does that certification mean specifically?
Well, each pump company will certify you to train people on their equipment. Most people don't need training like on just the general CGMs, but if the CGM connects with an insulin pump, usually the patient is going to need a little bit of training. You know, there's some specific settings that are individualized to them that need to be programmed into the pump, and then they need to be monitored, and the settings have to be adjusted, and then they're off and running. But I will tell you that process now so much easier than it was 20 years ago, because now we have the CGM to help us adjust the insulin versus having the patient set their alarm to wake up every couple hours in the middle of the night so we can see if we set their basal rate right, or, you know, having them check their blood sugar 8 times before they eat, 2 hours after they eat to see if we've got their carbohydrate ratio right. We've come a long way in technology, and not only do we have people with type 1 who were historically the only people who wore insulin pumps or continuous glucose monitors, but it's now also available for people with type 2 diabetes that require insulin. So they have access to that technology as well.
Yeah, this technology has just shifted and made such a difference for safety and patient quality of life. So what we're talking about now is anyone with type 2 diabetes that need insulin, but especially the connection of the CGM automatically connecting to the insulin pump is going to be used for, would you say most or some people with type 1, or where is that ratio?
It's really a personal decision. Ideally, I think most healthcare practitioners and doctors would say, I want everybody that has type 1 diabetes on an insulin pump. But there's a lot of things that might prevent people from wanting an insulin pump, depending on age. You know, if you're in high school and you're a high school girl and you're a cheerleader, do you want something on your stomach? Sometimes it's body image issues. And some people think there's limitations. Like I've had people say, oh, well, I'm a firefighter, so I can't wear a pump. I'm an active athlete. There's nowhere to put it. And so people just have some preconceived ideas about why they would or wouldn't be a good candidate for an insulin pump. And a lot of people who will get on it later in life, they'll say, I wish I would have done this 10 years ago when my doctor told me to. But you know what? You weren't ready at that time. Maybe when your doctor was talking about it, there was a good reason that you didn't go on it. You're on it now. You're experiencing the benefits now. Just move forward.
Could you describe what it was like before the pump and the CGM was communicating with your phone?
Like looking back, it was terrible. What we were asking people to do, we're like, we really would like to know what your sugar is before you eat. And then we want to know what it is 2 hours after you eat. And then could you check it bedtime too? And and we want to know what it is when you wake up first thing in the mornings. And so people in the beginning, when they were diagnosed, they would be motivated to do the finger sticks. But then they're just like, forget this. I don't want to do this anymore. And it was more challenging. And they just would get burnt out on it. But the fact that we always have our phones with us now and they can either just scan, or now most of the meters just send the data and you don't even have to scan anymore. It just shows up every 5 minutes. It really takes that health burden off. So yeah, it's come so far. And I just really think that people are probably going to start doing way better with their diabetes now, getting access before they have diabetes. And I'm super thrilled about.
Dietitians are always so passionate about preventative care. That's one reason I like to see A1C over time. If I see it creeping up, getting close to prediabetes, we're going to have a different type of conversation. I know you have prediabetes, I want to stop it right in its tracks and see if we can bring it back down. I had a patient the other day say, "Oh, I'm just one tick into prediabetes and my doctor's freaking out." And I said, "Yeah, I'm freaking out. This is a very big deal and we need to take it really seriously. And I'm here to help you." So sometimes I don't think folks realize how serious this is.
Yeah. And they're just waiting till they get to that 5.7. So at 5.6, they're like, whew, I'm good. Until it hits 5.7, I'm good. But it's like, no, if it went from 5.5 or 5.4 to 5.5, like we should be paying attention. Why is it starting to creep up? What's going on? What changed? And what can we do to pause that or start reversing it?
It's so important to be looking at trends, and looking at A1C trends is one of my favorite things to do, which is why I want to see it being drawn at least every year in the non-diabetic population.
Well, and that's one of the cool things about the CGM is they have the GMI, the glucose management indicator on there, which is kind of the equivalent to an A1C. So every 2 weeks, patients can look at their reports and then they can see like, oh, my glucose management indicator is a 6.4 and last week it was a 6.7. So they can see week by week their A1C starting to come down. I think that gives people some peace and some relief, like I'm on the right track. And they feel more empowered and I can control this, like I can do this.
Orgain offers a wide variety of great tasting, diabetes-friendly nutrition products featuring impressive nutrition profiles with zero to minimal added sugar. Right now, my favorite is Orgain's 20 grams of protein plant-based chocolate shake. It tastes great, there's no added sugar, and it's convenient to grab on the go. Check it out for yourself at Orgain.com. I don't think I've ever seen a shift in all my years of being in nutrition as much as the awareness of GLP-1 medications that burst onto the scene in the past, I would say from my non-diabetes perspective, like 1.5 to 2 years. How long have you been working with the weight loss injectables?
I've probably been at least 15 years because Byetta was one of the first ones. And that was the injectable you had to take like an hour before you ate. You had to do it twice a day. So it wasn't that great yet. Like it worked, but it was still kind of laborsome, giving those extra injections. But since we've had the once a week shots come on board, that's a game changer. Like again, less needles going into people's bodies. And then medicines that are actually helping with weight loss versus traditionally, most of our diabetes medications were causing weight gain. Now I feel like we have a lot better choice when it comes to medications in terms of helping people with weight loss and getting effective blood sugar control.
I'm glad you brought up that these have been around for a long time. That's a very common misconception. Some of these weight loss injectables have been around since about 2005. But what we've seen in the past couple of years is people without diabetes using them, people who are not obese using them, celebrities using them. Can you define GLP-1 and just talk real quickly about how these injectable medications work?
Yeah. So GLP just stands for glucagon-like peptide. And the thing about the GLP-1s are that they do a lot of really cool things in the body. So number one, they tell the pancreas, hey, it's time to make insulin. So let's do this. So the food comes on board and they make insulin. The second thing that it does is it helps the brain send a message to the body that says, hey, you're done eating. And then the third main thing that it does is it slows gastric emptying. The contents of their stomach are not releasing as fast, so they feel satisfied for longer and they tend to not want to eat as much. So that's why it's helping with the weight loss.
I'm seeing people not lose weight at all, and then I'm seeing people lose uncontrollable amounts of weight. What are you seeing? What's your experience been?
There's probably been several patients that I've worked with that are just like, I gain weight on that GLP-1. And I'll be honest, I don't know why that is. They just might be a non-responder. And then we have the exquisite responders that are like just on the initial dose and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm already losing weight. It's just a spectrum of responses from people, and some definitely do better than others with it.
There's something very interesting that I've seen you talk about, which is increasing GLP-1 naturally in your own body. So what we're talking about is the medications that you can inject it, but is it true that you can also do it without the injections?
Oh, definitely. You've seen supplements that are starting to come out that are called GLP-1, and they've got the probiotic strain that are designed to help. And a lot of that is related to akkermansia. But there's a lot that we can do with food. So really focusing on fruits and vegetables. A lot of our fruits are going to have polyphenols, which are going to be really good for that strain of bacteria, the akkermansia, to kind of help it flourish. So, brightly colored blueberries, cranberries, strawberries, anything that's brightly colored fruit or vegetable is going to help promote that. The second thing is just the high fiber stuff. Artichokes, broccoli, plantains, even some of those starchier fruits or vegetables can be beneficial as well. And then butyrate, like hard cheeses and butter. Focus on our healthy fats, getting those in. That's really important. Exercise actually is good for akkermansia and butyrate. And then the other thing that I don't think people think about or they know about as much is when you get good quality sleep and you stop eating maybe about 3 hours before you go to bed. So you give your gut time to kind of finish up digestion and really work on the immune system and really repair as we sleep. That's also really good for improving GLP-1 or improving akkermansia and butyrate production. All of those things combined. So again, what I mentioned earlier is these are carbohydrate foods, the things that are going to help. So if you're cutting all that stuff out, you might be missing the boat there when it comes to improving your own GLP-1 production.
We've been talking a lot on this podcast about gut health and the brain-gut connection and the skin connection, but it also sounds like there's a GLP-1 and weight management gut connection. So good gut health, carbohydrates that have lots of fiber, and gut microbiome diversity are absolutely key.
I don't think there's anything out there that is not impacted by gut bacteria and the gut health. So if we can keep our gut happy, I think our body in general is pretty happy.
There's also this interesting level of personalization and customization that comes with weight, with blood sugar management, with gut health. I'm wondering about nutrigenomics. It's a huge passion of mine, but you also dabble in nutrigenomics.
What got me into it was my husband, super healthy guy, but his LDL was kind of popping up and we're like, what the heck is going on? One of the things that we did was we did a lot of genetic testing. So the really important two tests that we did was the ApoE test to see which genetic variant he was. And we also did the haptoglobin test. And what was cool about these two tests is it actually tells you based on if you're a ApoE 3-4 or 4-4, you actually do better with vegetarian style eating. And about 25% of the population fall into that genetic variant type. And then there's about 11% of people that can do like 30 to 35% of their calories from fat. So these are the people that tend to tolerate the keto style or the paleo style eating a little bit better. And then the other 64% of people, they're right there in the middle. And these are the people who do well with kind of a Mediterranean style eating pattern where we're focusing on high fiber. We're eating all the foods. We're not excluding anything. I just think that that's really interesting. I mean, it doesn't get any more individualized than your genes. That's why it's so funny when people are just like, yeah, keto all the way. That's the only way to reverse diabetes. It's like, well, for some people.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And I've seen this happen to people. People do vegan or vegetarian and they'll tell me, I feel terrible, or this isn't for me, but I don't understand why. Or I've had folks that do keto so beautifully and we work together to make it as good as it could be. And their cholesterol is terrible and it's just getting worse and worse. But there's also evidence on very low carb diets like ketogenic or paleo where they see huge improvement. So you are so right. It does come down to probably what's going on with the genes. And we can test for that now. So what happened with your husband? What did he do?
Everything is perfect now. He has cleaned up his diet some. He's a creature of habit, likes to eat the same thing every day, but half of his plate is filled with broccoli and carrots. He's really stepped up his game in terms of just overall nutrition, paying more attention to his fiber intake. He's doing awesome.
That's so fantastic that he could use that personalized information and then feel excited about making those changes himself. So did you do medical genetic testing through a doctor, or did you do what I would refer to as nutrigenomic testing, which is commonly done through dietitians, and you get like a report?
So we both did like 23andMe, but we didn't do the nutrigenomics test, which I'm definitely fascinated about. But the two that affect your diet are the ApoE test, and then there's the haptoglobin. The haptoglobin one, if you're haptoglobin 2.1 or 2.2, when you eat gluten, the zonulate, the byproduct that's produced, your body can't break it down. It causes more inflammation in the body. And people who have diabetes, if they're eating gluten and they have that haptoglobin 2.2 or 2.1 gene, they're 5 times more likely to have a heart attack than the people that don't have that gene. Just super fascinating stuff. And I love that we have more control and we have more knowledge now, and we can take action on these things and live longer, healthier, higher quality lives because of it.
I'm wondering what other health tech trends you might be seeing right now in diabetes or beyond.
Most insulin pumps now talk to a CGM, so they have that integrated system, and they adjust your base insulin needs or your basal insulin needs, get adjusted to a certain target. That target could be set at 100, 110, 120. So the pump is constantly, if it sees your sugar starting to go up, it's giving out a little bit of extra insulin to help bring you back down. If your sugar goes out of control, it'll actually give an autocorrection bolus, which is a little bit more insulin to help bring it back down to target. But one thing that people still have to do is they have to tell the insulin pump when they're going to eat and how much. So they have to be able to quantify. They have to look at their plate and determine how many carbohydrates are on this plate and am I going to eat them all? So if they have 50 carbs in front of them, they put that into the pump. The pump gives insulin for those 50 carbs, and then it continues to adjust. But there is a pump that came out where you just have to announce that you're eating. And you can say small, medium, or large meal. Like you don't have to quantify the carbs, and it will take care of it. And to start this pump, all you do is put your weight in. It takes care of everything else.
It sounds like you're really into the gut microbiome, boosting GLP-1 on its own, deep levels of personalization, pro CGM. I just love how many aspects you weave into your work. If you had like advice for someone listening who wants to really focus on blood sugar management, what are some of your biggest takeaways?
Put fiber on your radar. Start looking at the labels. What I like to teach my clients is look at the total carbohydrates, divide it by the fiber. And if that number's 5 or less, we're in a good place. We want to be eating this food on a regular basis. If the number's 10 or less, it's decent, like between 6 to 10. We're in a good place. Maybe it's not an everyday food, but it's decent. And if it's 10 or higher, make sure it's insulin worthy and make sure you like it, because it's probably going to send your blood sugar a little higher than you want. So that's the first thing, fiber. So I tell people, use your insulin wisely as you get older. And this is people that don't even have diabetes. I say the same thing, especially women entering into the perimenopause, menopause. Use your insulin wisely. So like if there's a chocolate brownie and you know it's your favorite, it's the best one you've ever had, get after it, go for it, eat it, enjoy it. But like if it looks like a, chocolate chip cookie's kind of dry, it's probably not the best use of your insulin. You could use it in a better way. So fiber and using insulin wisely. The second is if you want to feel more satisfied after you eat, see about bumping up your protein. Particularly all people as we age, 40s, 50s, especially 60s and beyond. If you're not getting enough protein, you're in a bad, bad place. We have got to maintain that muscle mass. And I'd like to circle back for a moment to the people who take GLP-1s. That's one of the main things that I talk to them about is get your protein in. Otherwise, we see muscle wasting. They're nauseous. They're like, I don't really feel like eating. I'm just going to eat some crackers. We're getting no nutrition here. We're just like eating crackers because we think it makes our stomach feel better. You have to get that protein in. And then I also push weightlifting. So that's the third thing that I would recommend for everybody in general, even the GLP-1 people, is let's start lifting some weights. We got to get some muscle mass going because the muscle definitely helps long term. So when I teach exercise to people, I say weightlifting is like long acting insulin. It's going to have a carryover effect and it's really going to help keep your blood sugar down over time. Cardio is like rapid acting insulin. I need my blood sugar to come down now. I'm going to go for a nice little walk and, we'll see that blood sugar drop. Problem is with weightlifting, if people have a CGM, sometimes they're like, oh, I made my blood sugar go up. So sometimes people will see their blood sugar go up when they're doing anaerobic activity, but then it always comes back down and it tends to be lower for longer. So the weightlifting, long acting, cardio helps with short term. That's why a 10-minute walk after a meal is so good for all of us. Number one, it helps with digestion, but it also helps our body use our insulin better, make those cells open up and get the sugar out of the blood.
Thank you for sharing your secrets with me, especially your secret matrix of fiber. And I want to hear so much more in our next episode about women, hormones, and diabetes and insulin resistance. Your expertise on that aspect is going to be critical. Our show is sponsored by Orgain and produced in collaboration with Large Media. That's LARJ Media. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Good Clean Nutrition Podcast. To stay up to date on the latest podcast episodes, be sure to hit follow on your podcast app. And if you like this podcast, I'd love for you to let us know. You can rate and review this show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or you can give us a thumbs up on YouTube if you're watching right now. I'm Ginger Hultin. You can find me online at gingerhultinnutrition.com. Thanks so much for listening.